almost 2 years of me being out in my life before I finally announced this publicly. And the reaction that I got from the evangelical world was a nightmare. It was shocking how hateful and
I'm so sorry.
Vulgar. Yeah, it was just shocking and awful and repeated like for months.
Hey everyone, welcome to Unstraight. I'm Mitch, your host, and I have a very exciting guest today. He is one of the big guys in the world of the LGBTQ coaching / activism, whatever we're going to call it. We'll talk about it. But I'm so excited. I'm Mike Maeshiro. Welcome.
Thank you, Mitch. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a good conversation, talking about lots of good stuff. How's your day been?
It's been good. If you want to know exactly how my day's been, I went to the doctor this morning to get my vocal cords checked out. My voice has been in some pain, which is frustrating. I've had this problem before, and so it resurfaced, and I'm getting it looked at. But it's fine. Everything's going to be fine.
Going to be fine. Stay healthy, positive mindset.
Yes, that's the goal. Yeah.
So let's get into talking about you. This is about you. A little bit of history. Why don't you just tell us about yourself? Give us the Mike Maeshiro bio. If I said, who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? Start there.
Yeah. Nice. Well, so the short version is my background is in Baptist evangelicalism. I was a fundamentalist evangelical for most of my life. And I was gay that whole time. And I knew from a very young age. And I also knew that I wasn't allowed to be that way. And so I went into ministry, and I went on a spiritual journey that landed me at a place called Bethel Church in Redding, California. That's where my career took off. And all the while I was deeply closeted and eventually got to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. I had to stop lying to myself and everyone else, and also being complicit with a harmful platform that dehumanized and vilified queer people.
Yeah. Can I stop you before you get too far?
Yeah.
Going back to growing up, and you said it was always there, you knew it was there, but you knew you weren't allowed to be this way. Were you believing, the theology that you had been taught, or at least the things that you had been heard over the pulpit, you believed you were bad. You believed this is a sin and I cannot be this.
Yes. I believed the way I was wrong, and I shouldn't be like this, and I should do my best to try and minimize the attractions I had toward men and encourage or hunt any kind of attraction toward women. For 3 decades.
Can I ask, were you ever in a heterosexual serious relationship? Did you marry any of that?
No.
No.
I never got married. I dated a friend for 2 months one time, and that was rough. And then I dated another friend years later for 7 months, and then I had to end that. And shortly after that is when I came out.
Got it.
But that's it. And that's a lot less engagement in that area than I've heard from other gay men who were in the closet. I was just very repressed and monk-like when it came to my sexuality.
And so I'm curious, obviously my own experience and a lot of guys that I talk to, growing up in the church, growing up with religion, I don't want to use a bad word, but it can mess with your mind. You know the word I was going to use.
Yeah. No, I know, and I agree. For sure.
So did you experience, I don't know, the inner homophobia, any traumas, any mental health issues as a result of keeping this all stuffed inside?
Yeah, for sure. Yes. And I don't know that I noticed that until after I came out, which that's a whole journey. We could talk a long time about that, but
no, I'm going to ask you about it.
So some of the things that I definitely suffered from being so deeply closeted and repressed were, self-hatred, right? Shame. In middle school, I wanted to die. I didn't want to be alive anymore, which obviously that's really painful and scary and what have you. And then, there's so much missed opportunity and stuntedness in my own development that I didn't get to experience the unfolding and growth at certain ages because of how shoved down my inner, especially sexuality was. And so, seeing men be affectionate with each other, I had a revulsion to it for a while, which wasn't true. It was a learned behavior and reaction, but like, I wasn't repulsed by it. I was terrified of it. Right. And I learned from what I saw in my home to be quote unquote disgusted by that. And so I demonstrated similar attitudes within myself. I don't know that I ever really expressed that outwardly to other people, but internally, if I ever came across something that was homoerotic or gay visibly, right, like I would have this pushback. So to me, like, that was absolutely internalized homophobia, right? Like, I learned to be averse to all that. Anyway, so things like that. I mean, I went through conversion therapy a few times, and that, like, like I went hunting for these repressed memories that I was molested as a child from people. I actually interrogated some of my family members and asked, like, did you do this to me? Because the counseling I was receiving was telling me that's what had to have happened in order for me to be this broken. And
of course,
it was so awkward and painful and like really like a big strain on the relationships. And anyway, so like, yeah, you just kind of learn to normalize hating yourself and being on the outside and learning how to camouflage and perform for other people in order to belong or feel some version of acceptance that isn't actually acceptance. And it was like that for years. So, I mean, just those things in lots of directions.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, and I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but like, did you start, before you came out, did you start the acceptance process? Like, because for me, more and more as I got older, I realized, and I didn't become an ally, but I almost like would stick up for gay people and LGBT community when somebody would say something negative, or, I was like, because I was realizing they are me, and I had this kind of like light bulb moment. I have a cousin who married almost the exact situation that I went through. He was the music guy at our church for a while, super talented guy, but he was married to my cousin, and he came out at like 40-ish. They got divorced. It was really ugly. And I just remember thinking at that time, I'm like 10 years younger than they are. And I remember thinking at that time, I was like, that's going to be me. I'm like, it's just a matter of time, and the same thing's going to happen. So like for me, it was kind of progressive. I kind of like started unraveling, and then I got to this moment of like kind of you mentioned, I can't take it anymore. Can't do it anymore. Something has to give, has to change. So tell me, I'm interested. The coming out part, you mentioned Bethel Redding, super familiar. I was a worship leader. I was a creative director guy. So super, super familiar with Bethel. And so you were a pastor. So can you tell me a little bit about how you got from being a pastor to like a gay man and coach and ally and activist, and I like to say informist, because there's a lot of you guys that like, you inform us about things we don't know, or about things that are going on, or about things that have been misinterpreted, or that the church is saying that isn't true. And so, how'd you get from pastor to who Mike is today?
Yeah. So I had now, whoever's listening and whatever version of spirituality you have at this point, like, be empowered in that. I don't need you to agree with what I'm about to say. I don't really, I'm just going to share with you the experience I had where, so I had multiple experiences from like 18 to my early 30s where there was this deep conviction, and I had what I would call or classify as like encounters with God, who I understood God to be. And many of these experiences were affirming me as a gay man. And some of those experiences, I was not brave enough to admit that's what was happening. Some of them were explicit enough that I couldn't deny, like God was like embracing me as a gay person. And like,
this happened, like, these were happening while you were still in ministry or after you came out?
Before and during ministry. Yeah. Before. I mean, my first experience with who I know God to be, the first one was like pretty jarring, and like, it was so foreign to me. I didn't know what was happening. It was very emotional. The second experience, I explicitly heard God say to me that they wanted me to be gay. And I was like, they can't say this to me. There's no way that's true. That's not biblical, whatever. So, but there was no part of me that doubted this was God, right? Like, I knew what was happening. And so
this, by the way, is the first video I watched of you.
Oh,
the
really?
very first one is God wants me to be gay, or God wants you to be gay. I was just like intrigued. I'm like, wow, got to hear what this guy's saying.
Yeah. So like, that was a really controversial message to be receiving at 19. I was 19. And so I didn't tell anybody that for a long time. I just like kept it deep in my soul. And I enjoyed what I would describe as intimacy with God. I felt deeply accepted and loved and known by God. But I didn't accept myself as a gay person. So for multiple of these experiences, God would show up and embrace me fully the way I was. And I always put conditions on that, or qualifiers, like, you can't love me like that yet. I'm still gay, like I'm still trying to be straight. I'm not straight yet. So you can't love me like that. And that, so I was always putting all these conditions. And when I look back, I'm like, it wasn't me doing that. It was the conditioning and the indoctrination and the
system.
Programming that I'd lived under for so long, that was putting all these requirements and conditions on the love of God in my life. And so when I was 31, I had broken up with that second girlfriend and I don't know, I wasn't like super conscious of this, but at some point there was a moment where I watched the Taylor Swift documentary Miss Americana on Netflix, and she goes hard on advocating for the queer community at some point in that movie. And
I love her support.
Yeah, and it struck me in a really shocking, like visceral way. I was really uncomfortable and surprised. And then a couple weeks later, and then a couple weeks after that, I had a couple more experiences where like Bible verses were being brought, or like passages of scripture were coming up in my head, and I'd pull them up on my phone and read them. And there was this like energy to it, this like deep conviction. And basically like these messages were like rebuking exclusion and qualifiers and conditions on the acceptance and love that God is giving to people. And after that third experience, I was like, oh, I am not just like rejecting myself. I'm now actually like being found guilty of being complicit with a whole institution, a whole platform, a whole organization that goes out of its way to harm and vilify and dehumanize queer people.
In the name of God and in the name of love.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't be part of this. So it was like a big, like definitive line of demarcation in my life. And like, I remember the experience, like it was a lot of experiences that finally culminated in that one moment. But I broke. I couldn't do it anymore. And so the next part of that journey emotionally and mentally was like embracing the loss. I was like, I'm about to lose everything. I'm going to lose all these relationships, access, platforms, income, respect, and like all this privilege. I was about to lose a lot of stuff.
Yes. I'm just saying, I'm them there. I relate.
Yeah. So that was like a big counting of the cost process for me, and it took some days. And then I started coming out to people, and then I started like reading into the theology. I'm like, okay,
how was the coming out? How was the coming out to people? How did you? What kind of response did you get?
Everyone I came out to the first several times, they were, I think, a little shocked. They were kind. They listened. They did the best they could to manage their own discomfort. Nobody was affirming in my life. So nobody was like, wow, I love that about, they were like, wow, thanks for telling me. I appreciate that you trust me. I love you. Wow, this must be hard. I'm so sorry you would do this by yourself. There's a lot of that, which I appreciated and I needed. Nobody was affirming at that point, but they were gracious and gentle, But yeah, then I started doing the work of the theology, of pulling it apart and, understanding like, where did we get it wrong? How did we miss this? Does the Bible say these things?
Yeah.
And after about 8 or 9 months of hard study there, I became fully convinced the Bible is not condemning queer people in any way, any of the passages.
Can I ask you, were there any specific resources that were really instrumental in your understanding of what Scripture really says?
Yes. I read probably 8 or 9 books
same.
Right away. And of those, God and the Gay Christian by Matthew Vines was a really helpful first step for me. It's a deeply evangelical book, but he just made some very good arguments and was very studious and due diligent in like substantiating his claims and poking at the hypocrisy and double standards. Justin Lee's book called Torn was a very humanizing conversational book. Yeah, so that was really helpful to read. He just also presented a lot of social and conversational problems and faux pas around this conflict and exposing some very real logical fallacies and misinformation.
I felt such an authenticity with Torn. Like I just really his writing and like his sharing his personal, I felt he was so genuine in like, God, show me if it's this, then I will go with that. If it's this, then I'm going to go with that. And I totally believed him. He was not trying to make a case for himself.
Yeah, totally. But then the book that I think that I found to be the most helpful, and I can't tell if it's because of how far along the process I was by the time I read this book, or if it was just myself, but there's a book called Unclobber by Colby Martin.
Oh yeah, very familiar. And Colby's going to come on the podcast also.
Nice. So yeah, so I would say that book.
That's my one I go to everybody. I'm like,
yeah, it's the one I read.
Read this one. No, and again, I love Matthew's book. For me, it's academic, but I'm like Colby, and here's why I really love Colby's book, is because when he wrote the book, and I think he even says this in the writing, he didn't know a gay person. He didn't have a family member. He didn't have a gay friend. So for me, here's this straight guy who just feels called to really study these scriptures, and this is the theology that he arrived at. So to me, it just held a little more weight, because I felt like all these other guys were gay men, in trying to really study the scriptures to find out what they say. Colby, he didn't have a dog in the fight. You know what I mean? He wasn't like trying to arrive at this theology for any specific reason. So it just kind of helped. It's just for me personally, that's it. It affected me in a different way.
Interesting. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So I love how you've kind of arrived at a place where you're not afraid to say whatever needs to be said. And I mean that as a compliment. I mean that as like your social media, the issues that you tackle, the little signs you hold up, the DMs that you share, all of that. It's like you're okay with calling people out. And I love that, because there's just so much misinformation, so much, I think you even used the word earlier, brainwashing. It's like, it's really, really hard to undo that. And there's way more of that going on than there are guys like us that are trying to undo some of that and help people through the process of like undoing.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't know. How did you arrive at was that like just a switch? I'm going to start being this guy, or did you get more bold and more bold and more bold?
Yeah. I mean, that kind of came out of necessity. When I came out publicly in 2022, so it was like about a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years of me being out in my life before I finally announced this publicly. And the reaction that I got from the evangelical world was a nightmare. It was shocking how hateful and
I'm so sorry.
Vulgar. Yeah, it was just shocking and awful and repeated like for months, day after day after day, just reading. And I read all the comments. I read all the emails, DMs. I read them all. And in hindsight, I'm like, man, that was not good for me. I don't think that I should have ingested all of that, especially that much in such a short period of time, and it being so fresh and raw. I just like stood in front of the fire hose of homophobic and heterosexist hate and discrimination and just like got deluged. And so I had to pace myself. I eventually had to like limit how much of it I would look at in the day, and this litmus test for me became like how much of it my nervous system could handle before I became activated. And if I did get triggered, then I would stop for the day and process and whatever. And so that I had to like learn how to like alchemize and metabolize that stuff, because it wasn't going away. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
So part of me was like, okay, I could stop this by just not posting anymore. I could refrain from saying what I've been saying. And then this would stop, right? People would probably stop coming for me at that point. But I was like, but then the haters win. But then, all this, the price that I've paid and the journey I've been on and the truth that I'm living gets snuffed out. Like, I can't let that happen. So what ended up happening was I had to change my lifestyle. I got a therapist. I went on walks multiple times a day, every day, got in the sun, touched grass. I got with friends. I started writing more. But ultimately, like, the thing that was the game changer for me was instead of blocking and deleting, I started showcasing the hate that I was getting, and I started using it as an educational tool.
Kind of confronting it.
Yeah, confronting it and exposing to the people who are listening, like, who are willing to listen and to learn, like, hey, this, just so you know, this is happening to me. I'm a human being in real time. People are talking to me like this. This is crazy. This is so shocking. And also, none of this is true. And so that I would just like take my time and just pull apart the toxicity and educate, and and people were very receptive, and but it created a lot of buzz and dialogue and a lot of attention, which I appreciated, because I think there was a lot. And so I had people regularly DMing me being like, thank you for what you're doing. I'm learning so much. I had no idea, and that was so rewarding for me to see like all this horrible stuff that was coming at me being turned into a platform to help people.
Yes.
Like dismantle their own homophobia and their own heterosexism. And so anyway, that it's been a couple of years now, and I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
So it came out of just like me trying to survive that.
No, so you are, and I hope with this podcast, like I said, I'm such a newbie and I'm just started doing it and I'm learning. But one of my hopes is that, like what you just mentioned, you're not just helping people from the queer community, you're helping the hetero community understand and see behind the curtain of like what you've experienced from quote unquote the Christian world and people who don't agree or support, so that's great. That's what I'm saying I want to do with this podcast too, is I want to help gay people who are facing and going through similar circumstances, but I also want to show the heteronormative world, that we face all this stuff. It causes a lot of mental health issues. People get stuck. There's hatred, there's bigotry, all the things that you are exposing. So, I mean, like the work you're doing, man, is so important. So good. So important.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
No, man, really, I can't give you enough and talk about that. So that's probably a good transition to your coaching. Let's talk about it. I think your coaching organization is called Numa.
Yeah.
First of all, where did this word come from, or is it an acronym? Right. How'd you come up with Numa?
Yeah. So the word Numa, the spelling is we changed the spelling of it, but in Greek, the word Numa means spirit or breath, or anyway. So it's used in a lot of ways, and given the nature of the work that I was doing, Numa felt like a very central, relevant word, right? So my team was like, we need a brand, we need a name, we need whatever, and so we workshopped it or whatever, and eventually we landed on Numa. Changed the spelling to make it a little bit more modernized, and so that's where it came from. I still use it, even though so much of my theology has changed, so much of my worldview and application is different than it was back then. But anyway, that's the name of that organization.
But you would consider yourself a spiritual person, yes?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so it's still very applicable. Numa, nice. Spirit, spiritual, spirituality.
Thanks. Yeah, it just has a lot of associations with it that I just don't care about anymore. So in my mind, that's not true.
I was going to say to you, like to me, to somebody who doesn't have this background, it's just like spirituality.
Yeah. Totally. So back then I was coaching people, and specifically the emphasis of coaching that I was doing was, because I did leadership and business coaching, but mostly the coaching I ended up specializing in that I appreciated and was sought after for was spirit coaching. So basically helping people discern the spiritual atmosphere of their own life, their journey, their internal world. Wow. There's a lot of that, which is peculiar to think about, right? But mostly it was the discernment stuff I was teaching. I was like practicing it and demonstrating it for them in our coaching sessions and like pulling stuff apart. And it was profound to watch, people's their lives would change and the light bulbs would go off, and it was really rewarding. When I came out, obviously that was like a huge shift, and the focus of my work necessarily had to change, because it wasn't just I'm gay. It was also like, oh, by the way, so much of our theology is toxic and not okay, and based on things that aren't true to me anymore. I don't believe that anymore. So that was a huge, like, obviously a brand shift, but like the work itself was shifting. And then also the clientele I was looking to help change. Like I was helping a lot of straight white Christian charismatics with my core. And I was like, I don't really want to like give my energy and time to that anymore. I want to help people who like need help, like not just make rich Christians more comfortable in their spirituality. I want to help people actually like recover and heal and take their lives back, especially so marginalized. So
did you approach any of your, I don't know, these white Christian, whatever people you were helping and say, hey, are you interested in learning about why we should be more inclusive? And,
No, I didn't talk to individuals in that respect. When I did my coming out video, I did it privately first, and everyone who is a subscriber, client, whatever, at that point, I invited them to a private video with me. And a lot of people came to that. And I shot it and recorded it. And then a few days later, I posted it as that YouTube video. But that initially was offered to the people who were working with me at that point. And then so a lot of them left. No questions. They just like cut me out, you know.
Yeah.
Some of them did ask questions and some of them changed their minds and went on a journey with me. And I was so like thankful and like honored by that. And it was beautiful to watch. And them are still with me to this day. And it's wild to watch that process. And I'm so, yeah, it's like such trust and respect, you know, that I'm receiving from that.
And they knew you as a person. You know what I mean? And you're the same person, even though your belief system or your theology may have shifted quite a bit.
Yeah, totally. And then so did theirs.
Yeah, that's great. No, it's necessary. I mean, but so what does Numa look like? Like, if you know, what's your approach to coaching now? And then like somebody wants to get involved with your coaching.
Yeah,
how does that work?
So at some point, I stepped out of the coaching, and I had several coaches on my team who I had personally trained, and they were doing most of the coaching, and I stepped away from coaching entirely. And then when I came out, there was so much pain and like nuance coming up in this coming out experience that I was like, man, I went on a journey. I had money, I had privilege, I had opportunity, I had a platform, I had access, I had education, I had resources and tools and education. Like I had all this stuff going for me that allowed me to go on this process. How is someone who doesn't have access to all of that? How are they supposed to do this? How are they supposed to like go on this journey of like ruining their own lives and coming out and like living authentically, and all of the backlash and onslaught of like the hate and opposition that comes with it? How are they supposed to do that and be okay? Like this is wild. So I was like, I want to create a space for people to have support, guidance, encouragement, clarity, like I needed. So I hunted and found several mentors who gave me the time of day and paid attention because I was a who's who from Bethel, right? So they were intrigued by my process, and that, you know, and for whatever reason, like gave me audience with people that I probably would not have gotten access to otherwise. And they were instrumental in my affirming of myself, like that process. And I'm so thankful for having several of them come into my life. Many of them were new relationships, but they were so catalytic to me healing and growing. So I was like, I want to be able to extend all the things I've learned, the resources, the transformation, the knowledge. Like I want to be able to put that on a lower shelf for other people who aren't going to have the time and the money and the resources to go on this pilgrimage and like hunt and, you know, consume. So I stepped into the coaching world again, and I started taking clients specifically. And so I predominantly at this point work with gay men. I work with queer people in general, but most of my clients are gay men who are coming out of the closet, who are married to women with kids, who are trying to figure out if they can still be Christian and gay. You know, there's lots of different iterations of where these guys are at in their process. So I'm stepping in to help them with that. And then the other coaches on my team work with mostly straight people who are trying to do better as allies. Some queer people work with my other coaches, and so their role is to come in more and to help with the advocacy and the education part of that process for people. Anyway, so that's what that coaching looks like.
No, that's amazing. And you know what? It's probably a better transition for us to go into talking about the groups.
Yeah.
Like, I know you have the Rainbow group and you have Ashes group, and I think you recently have started this allyship boot camp. So do you want to talk a lot about that a little bit? Because it's kind of connected to the coaching world.
Yeah, some of those are groups. The Allyship Bootcamp was a workshop that I did. It's a 2-part teaching series. Basically, just it's targeting straight people, wanting to help them grow in their knowledge base and comprehension and competency in how do they come alongside the queer community and help support and advocate for us. And then the other groups we have, so the Rainbow Room is probably one of the older groups that I still have going. It's a group for queer people. For a minute there, that's where all the lesbians were in my world. They were all at the Rainbow Room. But now it's a little bit more of a diverse group of queer people. But that's a space just for queer people to get together. I host it, and I just facilitate dialogue, and we just catch up. People are processing and sharing what's going on in the world, the wins, the pain, right? And there's just a lot of unfolding, continuous experiences that come from being queer in the spaces that people occupy. So it's a space to basically just like allow for there to be dialogue and support and validation of that journey. I have right now. It's called my Mike's Gay Discussion Group. I wish I had a better name for it, but I meet with exclusively gay men.
It's called
on
what?
Saturday. Mike's Gay Discussion Group.
Mike's Gay Discussion Group. Got it.
Yeah, I wish I had a different name for it, and I'd like to change the name. But anyway, that's it. Started as a book club. We read Velvet Rage together, and then
good book.
the guys wanted to keep going and wanted to have other things we talked about and engaged with. And so basically, it's a space for gay men to intellectually and relationally engage around more than just sex, art, music, movies, books. Though we read books together a lot. Anyways, there's that. And then Ashes is a group. Someone from my team hosts that space. That's for people who are deconstructing and who are just asking the big, scary questions about their theology. And then I host Ashes Book Club. So that's specifically for people who want to read the books that are confronting the theology and pulling up the ideas and that. And then lastly, I have a writers group. So this is for people who are, writing mostly novels. But there's lots of writers that have been in this, and we basically to share, hold each other accountable. We do challenges, we do writing prompts together, we critique each other's work.
Wow!
So those are spaces.
So many great resources there, man. And so tell us how would somebody get involved in any of those groups?
Yeah, so basically, they go to Maeshiro.com, my website, and then they can go to coaching/groups, and then they can look at the different options, and then some of them are gated with applications. Some of them they can join right away, and the information's there. Yeah,
and I'll put all of this stuff, these links in the show notes, so people can be like to rewind. Yeah, man, great, really good stuff. And so the writing group, I wasn't aware of this writing group you have, but that kind of leads me to something I've been enjoying little pieces of that you've been posting on social media, and that is the series that the God Made Me Gay memoirs that So tell us a little bit about that, how that got started. I mean, is that going to be a book, maybe a movie? I mean, what's happening with this? What inspired you to write your story out in this form?
Yeah, Mitch, you've done your homework. I like it. That's a good question. So, I mean, I've wanted to share my story in more specific, nuanced detail than just like a video on YouTube or like little sound bites on the internet, right? But writing it out was super intimidating. I don't know, I've been approached by publishers a few times in my life to write a book, and I just black out. I don't know what the deal is. I've got this mental block that I'm hoping to overcome at some point. But anyway, I was like, okay, you know what? I can't write my story in a book. I can't do it. That's never going to happen. But I could write little anecdotes. I could write little episodes, little stories, as long as I know there's a short term, there's an end to this, I could do that. So I basically tricked myself into writing this by just creating these little episodic entries. And so then I started a Substack, put it on there. And so people basically subscribe and can read every week. There's a new episode that comes out, and just my story. And it starts off with my Heartstopper era of just being closeted and gay, and then falling in love with somebody for the first time and having my first sexual experiences. And it's all romantic and cute and painful at the same time. And then it gets into, my journey into ministry and being at Bethel. And I'm deep into my conversion therapy, men's sexual purity group, me on the rise at Bethel era, which is a really fun, wild part of the story. So that's where I'm at currently at publishing at the recording of this episode. And so I did that because there are parts of the story that I wanted to share, one, for just me to express, but two, I think there are so many aspects of being closeted in evangelical spaces as a queer person that aren't intellectual. They're emotional, they're relational, they're psychological, right? And some of that's hard to describe in English. And so I wanted to just share from my own visceral version of vulnerability that I could, what it was like to be in that space, and just tell it and not try and curate a certain kind of takeaway, but more just give a little insight into what that experience was like, what I was thinking, how I was feeling, and hopefully bring those things I'm not even aware of for people to recognize. Yes, because I remember I know I've just felt so appreciative when I see authors describe experiences or describe things in ways that gave me voice for things I've experienced. I'm like, oh my God, that's so helpful. Thank you. So I'm kind of hoping that that's what happens here for my queer readers. And so the goal is it's one, the queer, closeted experience in evangelical spaces, but then two, a little bit of is a look at Bethel. It's a look at going to Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry and then being a leader in that environment, and, the hierarchy and the mental games and the psychological abuse that happens, without trying to just be this is psychological abuse. It's more this is what I was thinking and how I was feeling. This is how this leader responded to me. This is the circumstance I found myself in. These were the conditions, like just like letting someone step into it. Yeah, the goal is like to just kind of share some of that.
See behind the curtain a little bit.
Yeah. And so I do think at some point it will probably become a book. I don't know.
Yeah. It makes sense to me. Like you have all of the pieces for it. I mean, like wouldn't take much editing to like put this in a chronological, because you're kind of writing chronological, right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's what needs to happen. Like, what is that publisher's number? I'll call them and be like,
yeah, right.
He's actually writing a book, so just be ready. Just be waiting. Well,
nice.
That's really, really cool. So,
Thank you.
I'm going to start closing up, and my final question for you, or my maybe penultimate question, is tell us something you're passionate about right now, whether that's like music or a movie you're into or a series, politics if you want to go there. I mean, like we're a week out of a really, really important election. And so what are you like, what's lighting your fire in this moment?
Man, there are so many directions this could go.
Yeah.
What's coming up for me? I am an avid moviegoer. I'm a big fan of storytelling. I love movies and shows. And just, I mean, can we just take a moment and appreciate the level of quality coming out of just the series world? The movies and shows that are coming out are just like,
the
it's
streaming
wild.
networks.
Yeah,
like,
it's wild.
In 10 years' time, Amazon and Apple and Netflix, I mean, so much good stuff. The A-list actors are in like the streaming series. It's crazy.
It's crazy. The level, the caliber, the quality, it's amazing. I'm such a fan. I love it. A couple of shows I watched recently that I really enjoyed. Nobody Wants This with Kristen Bell and I forget the guy's name, but
have it on my list.
Yeah, it was a fun series. It's a straight love story, but it was cute and fun and clever.
Oh no, we can't watch that. Joking.
Heartstopper season 3 had just come out.
I have not. I watched a couple of little episodes, and I'm just like, I don't know if I. But there's so many. I mean, I'm into some of the teen drama. I'll try it again. There's some shows that I'm like you're not gonna believe this, but like I didn't get White Lotus at first.
Yeah, no, I get that.
When I first started it, watching, I'm like, even Schitt's Creek, I'm like, and then somebody said, okay, stick with it to like episode 2 or 3, and then I like got attached to the characters. The acting is so good in every character, so strong. But anyway, love Schitt's Creek. Yeah. I'll try Heartstopper again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth it. I'm watching Agatha all along right now. I'm really into that.
Someone else is like, oh, you gotta watch Agatha.
Anyway, so like, I'm a big fan of movies and shows. I could go on and on, but like,
okay. So last question about that.
Yeah.
Are you looking forward to, or could you care less about Wicked coming out?
Yeah, I bought my tickets 3 days ago.
Okay, so I guess that answers that.
I mean, I'm not like I can't wait.
Well, I mean, Mike, you bought a pre-sale. So you are looking forward to
it. I feel like I'm like probably a 6 or 7 on the scale of excitement.
Yeah, I
want
to be pleasantly surprised. I'm like, sometimes I feel like when they take a stage show and make a movie out of it, it like ruins it. It's less like you can't measure up. But there's been a few that have been really well done.
Yeah, so I think I've just seen so much publicity around Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande's relationship. They've gone to everything together for a while now. I'm like, I would just like to see the project that made this happen.
Yeah.
Can we just see it now already, please? Anyway.
I love Ari. Yeah. Anyway, now we get into music, so we won't go there. Okay, so let me finish up with what's next for Mike Maeshiro. What is next? You've got anything you're working on? Any project coming up? Anything you want to share with our audience?
That's a good question.
More of the same. I mean, my God, you have so much already going on. It's not like you need another project. I'm just curious of like, is there something coming up or just plug something you care about? I don't know.
Well, when you're asked that, like the thing that comes up for me is I'm excited about. I'm on season 4 right now of the God Made Me Gay memoir. We're between season 3 and 4 right now, so like we're on a 2-week break, and then season 4 episodes are going to start dropping. And I'm very excited about this era because The stories are hilarious. They're absurd. They're probably the most shocking and painful and profound and not the most, but like this is like it's ramping up. So I think I'm really excited about season 4 that's going to be coming out the next couple months. And then what happens beyond that. And I think the writing is getting better. I don't know if I want to say that out loud, but like, because I've been writing this story since before January of this year. And I feel like I'm just kind of finding a better groove. And so the writing feels like it's getting better and capturing the stories better, you know, so I got to go back and later and like edit some of the previous stories. But anyway, I do feel excited about that project. It's an ongoing, continuous project that I'm working on, and I'm excited about the episodes that are coming out. I think because I just think it's anybody who's been up to Bethel, like knows when they meet someone else from Bethel, there's like a connection and an understanding that other people don't get because it's such a specific culture. Okay. So to be able to try and describe this to people who don't have this experience, I love getting to hear people's reactions and their thoughts and judgments.
That's amazing. So anyway, like you guys can probably look at each other and not even say anything, just like with a look. It's like, you went to Bethel? Yeah, I went to Bethel. And you're like,
oh yeah. Then there's an immediate like, oh yeah.
You sold me on that. I'm like, I gotta go I have to be a part of this Substack because I'm gonna like, I've only seen like little bits and pieces, so I want to hear it from the beginning. That was my world. I mean, not specifically Bethel, but like very similar upbringing and church world and all of that. Came away from it like the crazy Pentecostalism. I came away from like, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, but when I was a young adult. But I've still been in the evangelical, charismatic. I tell people Hillsong-ish, Bethel. So yeah, I'm sure I'll relate to a lot of it.
I'm sure you would. Yeah. Nice.
Anyway, Mike, it's been so nice chatting.
Yeah,
finding a little bit more about who you are, what you do, the things you got going on. Great stuff, man. Really, really, really good stuff. And happy to have met you. Look forward to seeing what's next.
Yeah.
And
Mitch, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here and excited for your new project. Love that you're doing this podcast and can't wait to hear some of the other guests you have. And thanks for having me on.
It's all fun. Yeah. All right, so stay in touch, and I'm going to head over to Maeshiro.com and find out how I get on this Substack so I can read all the gory details.
Yeah.
Your life.
Thank you. Thanks, Mitch.
All right, man. Have a great day. Good talking.
You too.
Take
care.
You
too. Bye.
Bye. All right, that was my friend Mike Maeshiro, and as you see, he has lived a similar story to mine, although it sounds like he has some pretty... what do you want to call colorful details in his past that he's writing about, and you can find that on Maeshiro.com. He has all his links, also on social media. If you find him there, I think it's just at Mike Maeshiro, and I'll have that stuff in my show notes. But he's got the link in bio. What it's got, it's got links to all of these different things that he talked about. So this is Mitch, and this has been Unstraight. Thanks for joining me. Make sure you subscribe and you like and you share. We have a lot more good stuff coming up. And just thank you so much for being here. You guys have a great day, and big, big love.